There we go. Thank you. He's here. That would be in order with it? Good afternoon. I'll call to order the meeting of the Finance, Culture, and Economic Development Committee at 1:02. We just have a quorum, and we will work to get through the agenda before we lose that quorum. Councillor Inkster has to leave shortly after 2 for a family commitment at one of the schools. So we have before us an agenda. If there's no declaration of conflict, could I have someone move the agenda? And seconded. All in favor? Thank you. We have no appointments and no delegations, so we'll move to item 4.1, which is the minutes of the previous January 17th Finance, Culture, Economic Development meeting for receipt only. Moved, seconded. Any comments or questions around the motion to receive? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we will move to item 6.1, report from the Manager of Financial Services around mobile vending locations at Trail Bay, pages 9 to 68. Could I have a motion to receive the report? Moved, seconded. All in favor of receipt? Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in some ways, this is a housekeeping item. Back in March of 2011, a proposed amendment to the bylaw for, I'm writing the name here, the seasonal mobile vending was put to the Council of the Whole. It then went to Council after some public consultation, and Council then did agree to issue RFPs for both the Davis Bay and the Trail Bay Pier locations and to update the bylaws as required. Since then, it appears that only the Davis Bay location has had any RFPs issued for it. So we went back and looked into it, and we basically found out that the bylaw amendment was never put forward after 2011. We have no indication in the file as to why that didn't occur. So really our thoughts for bringing this report to the committee today was to allow the committee to reconsider the decision that was made 7 years ago and to find out if it still agrees with the direction provided, which is to amend the actual name here.
The bylaw.
Yes. The Parks, Land, Roads Temporary Rental Amendment Bylaw to allow for a mobile vendor at the Trail Bay location.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. Any comments or questions around this report?
Thank you.
Councillor Seegers.
I note, I read, this is a lot of information here, a lot of material back and forth. It indicated that council should change the fee to $750 a month. And I know that when we put an RFP out previously, we didn't actually have anybody come forward, in some cases, to claim those spaces. So I'm wondering if if we've done any due diligence around, how much they actually make. Is that something that they can support with the sales that they make there?
I would anticipate not. At the Davis Bay location, I believe it's $200 a month, $200 a month, I believe, is the charge. That was the anticipated charge that we would get for this one. We would put it out as an RFP, so it really would be open to any vendor to offer the amount they were willing to pay. So it wouldn't be a fixed cost. It would be an expression of interest to allow someone to say how much they could afford to pay. So in some ways, it'd be up to them to make a business case for it.
Okay, because in the documentation here, it was a recommendation that it go up to $750 a month.
Right, that does seem high to me as
Yeah,
well.
it does seem high. And then in the recommendation, it talks about adding the seasonal mobile vending location in Friendship Park, but it doesn't say anything about taking the one away for Kinnickinnick. Is that another change that we'd need to make in the bylaw? So I think that it was Kinnickinnick and Davis Bay were the ones originally identified in here.
If the committee wishes to do so, or we could keep that open and certainly put out RFPs for it. Again, we may not get any responses if we were to try. I'm not sure it would be a viable location for a mobile vendor. If you certainly don't want a vendor there, then it would be probably appropriate to make that amendment.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Inkster, did you?
Yeah, I just I was looking to Doug, just listening really close to the beginning. I guess we're just making sure everything matches with our bylaws, but I'm so unsure what happened with this. It was one of those things where we gave permission and recognized a new location, but I guess we're just matching everything up now, correct? Based on your report?
Councillor Inkster, through Madam Chair, yes, essentially that's it. It's in some ways a housekeeping item that the bylaws don't match what the recommendation was. So after 7 years, the question for the committee is, do you still agree with that decision made 7 years ago or not?
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Mueller.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a process question. So if we were to approve this today, then the RFP would go out and council would not get another look at anything that came in on that. Is that correct?
Essentially, yes. We'll go to council next week for ratifications would have to be endorsed by council in next week's council meeting before the bylaw was changed. At that point, yes, the RFP could go out.
But I mean, in terms of selecting and actually having one of these come to fruition, it would then at that point be an operational issue.
The way the bylaw is written now,
totally
yes, it would be.
stuff.
Again, if you wanted to have that oversight, you certainly could.
Okay, that raises a couple of issues for me because I know that there's a number of businesses in the downtown core and slowly over the last year and a half, especially around our farmers market, they're beginning to raise the issue of unfair competition and the actual price of running a retail location in Sechelt, what it means. Of course, I'm in favor of better use of our waterfront. I think that's one of our very biggest resources here in Sechelt, but I think this needs a little more work because we could potentially see that one of these vendors could come forward, serve coffee, and we know that we have 100 feet down the road a number of coffee vendors, and I could see them having an issue with that. I know I would, so at this point, I'm not going to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. On page 17 in the package, it's got 6A, and it says the clause is general mobile vendor vehicles or apparatus are not permitted to conduct business in the downtown core. So the Trail Bay spot, I believe, is in the BIA area. Would that need to be modified as well if we're going to put that one forward?
I believe in this case, the downtown core is identified in a map in the bylaw itself. So it could be a map that is different than the BIA area.
Mm-hmm.
The map would have to be adjusted to make sure that well, I'm saying the map itself isn't necessarily tied to the BIA area so much as it's in the bylaw itself defines what the downtown core is. So we certainly have to make sure the map matches the bylaws.
Councillor Inkster.
So the concerns that have been expressed before by, although if you look back at the material, it was one individual that had some expressions of concern, although that individual then set up an outlet in Davis Bay, which is interesting how things sometimes go. If you look back at the minutes and the complaints made, if in fact we defeat this, it dies here. One of the reasons why I may support it is because of the numbers at this committee, I'd like it to go to council for a fuller discussion in terms of 3 more members there with some of their perspectives and how Councillor Shanks, as an example, has some ideas from what's happened in the downtown core over the last number of years in terms of vendors and such. So I've heard the concerns before, as was noted. I took it seriously in terms of people who pay corporate or commercial tax, then being concerned about competition. I think the reason these particular things come along is to offer options and things that are different from what is normally offered. So that's why I'll be supporting it to go to council. I just want to hear a broader discussion.
Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple things to my previous comments. I think what I would be looking for on this one, it's been since 2011 that this last work was done. There needs to be some referral on this so we can get some feedback from, at the very least, our Downtown Business Association and some of the impacted businesses. Also, what I would be looking for is a higher pad rent, because at $200, that is an assistance to business, in my opinion. So that's not something that I could support.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Following up on Councillor Mueller's comment, what is the process? If we approve this, what is the process with regards to this bylaw? How will the Downtown Business Association, for example, give us input, and anybody else who feels that they're impacted by this?
At this point, it would be certainly just letters to council when it came forward to council. If it was to be approved today and moved forward to council, who then approved the changes, the bylaw would simply move forward. There's no process for communication unless that's something the committee would want to do. So an alternative recommendation here could be to send it back to us to do some consultation with other groups to look up other prices, et cetera, as opposed to moving this on to council now.
I would like to see consultation on this. So we get, I mean, as you said, it's been, what, 7 years? So I'm sure there's some changes in the community, and some may like it, some may not. And I think we need to get that input. So if we were to pass this, could we also add to it that this recommendation and the proposed bylaw be referred out to community associations or the Downtown Business Association, Chamber and Downtown Business Association, for example, maybe even the farmers market,
If that's your
for
wish, pass a
feedback
motion.
prior to this coming to council?
Certainly.
Okay, I'll make that motion then. Thank you.
Did you get the motion? So prior to it coming forward to council, Councillor Seegers has suggested that it be referred to the SDBA Chamber of Commerce and Farmers Market with a copy of the proposed bylaw. And that's been moved and seconded. Did we capture it all? Anything further? All those in favor of the motion? Is there a time attached to that? Thank you. And next week we have everybody back but the mayors, so that'll be good. You'll have a chance to. 6.2, report from Director of Finance regarding Sunshine Coast Community Foundation grant policy. You have a report in front of you, pages 69 to 71. Could I have a motion to receive the report? Moved. Second. All in favor of receipt? Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on February 1st, Sunshine Coast Community Foundation issued a call for applications to access their grants. They're restricted under the Canada Revenue Agency rules, so they can only give money to qualified donees. So the challenge becomes for a lot of local groups is they're not registered charities, therefore not qualified donees. The district is a qualified donee by virtue of being a municipality. So we could receive or accept the grants on behalf of or from the Sunshine Coast Community Foundation, and then through our community investment program, give or grant that money to someone else. It's up to us then what we do with the money. So at this point, what we're suggesting is to have the committee endorse a policy to sort of provide a framework for us to whether we want to even engage or enter into these type of arrangements where we become the recipient of the grant from the Sunshine Coast Community Foundation, and then we then in turn would give the money to another group, which is council's prerogative at any time. So really that's the question here for the committee, is whether you want to endorse this policy and then move it forward. For your information, there has been one group has come forward with a request for us to partner with them. So a report will be coming at the next council meeting for consideration. So certainly this policy could come at the same council meeting, in fact.
Questions? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. A few things come up for me on this one. I know we recently had a bylaw come forward or a policy come forward with regards to our status with CRA and what we needed to do with regards to that. If we receive funds from community foundations and then give those to somebody else, do we then need to do the reporting back to community foundations? And how do we do that to stay in line with the CRA rules that we have to follow?
Yes and no. From the CRA rules, we have no obligation. We're the recipient of the funds, so the implication or the impetus is on the Community Coast Foundation to make sure they're giving the money to someone they're allowed to give it to, and that we're not flowing it through as such. So we do need to partner and agree to a partnership through that to maintain CRA's rules. But for the Community Foundation's perspective, we would not be issuing any tax receipts for this money. I do believe because of that, though, in the spirit of CRA's rules, we do have an obligation to report back. So part of the condition, if we were to partner with someone, is we would have to monitor what they're doing, follow up, make sure they completed what they said they were completing, have them report to us, which we would then report back to the Sunshine Coast Community Foundation. So yes, there's an obligation for us to monitor what's been happening.
Okay. Okay, I have other questions, but I'll let it go for now.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Mueller.
To me, I think this is a timely recommendation from our staff, and I'm in support of it. I think that we need to be following these rules. Of course, they've been changing slowly over time, and this puts us where we need to be. So I'm comfortable with it.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. If I actually look at the policy on page 71, I'm just wondering if there needs to be a little more clarification. So under the purpose, it doesn't actually indicate that we are applying on behalf of a community organization, right? So supporting community-based requests for submitting grant applications to grant-making and or public foundations. This is on behalf of a community organization, is it not? Or not?
I believe technically no. We are the applicant for the grant.
Okay.
And we would be telling the Community Foundation what we intended to do with the money, which would be to give it off to another organization to do some work on our behalf. So it certainly should be a project that the committee or council supports. You know, in general, there's a benefit to the community, but we are the applicant, not the nonprofit.
And the way that I read that, as the applicant, we have certain duties to oversee, and because of those implications, each applicant would come before council, their application, before we would enter into the partnership.
That's correct. The intention would be that each application would come to council for consideration on an individual basis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further? So can we have someone move the second? Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. It's carried. Item 6.3, report from the Director of Corporate and Financial Services regarding Seashout Library funding increase request, pages 72 to 75. Could I have a motion to receive? Moved in second. All in favor? Thank you. and to the director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this report is really for information for the committee. The next item on here is the additional request. So I felt because the library funding had a fair bit more information to provide, it should come as a separate report to the committee. So just from the library funding, they've asked the district for an additional $145,000 towards their increased operating expenses. I believe just over $260,000 they're looking from all the funders, with $145,000 coming from the district. So I just felt to provide the committee with some additional information for their consideration when looking at this request as budget deliberations go on. So one concern I had is the fact that most of the items that the library is requesting are operating expenses. So although the contract with the library really doesn't provide for an increase in base operating budgets as such. Section 2.6 of their agreement says for any one-time or capital items, council or the funders could consider supporting them, but operating items are not, which certainly makes sense because when you increase as an operating expense, you're really now committing for long-term future years in perpetuity. Certainly council has the option to just provide a grant for the $145,000 outside of the agreement. So there's nothing to stop the council from just giving the grant outright. The other option would be to have us meet with all of the three funding partners, the Indian Government District and the SCRD, and reopen the contract and see if we will, all of four signatories would have to agree to an amendment of the 2018 grant amount. So again, I just wanted to present that to the committee and then just update on some of the concerns or comments that were made when this came forward from the chief librarian, particularly on the in-kind costs that the district's provided. So page 74, paragraph 3.7 just shows what the in-kind costs that the district incurs on behalf of the library over and above the cash that we give. So you can see in general, it's about $170,000 a year. Now, a large portion of that is the amortization of the building as a whole. If we take the library's share, just over 45%, it works out to about $90,000 a year in costs that the district incurs on behalf of the library. That's over and above the grant or the operating grant that we provide. So I just wanted to put that into context. It works out to about $4.95 per capita using the same formulas that the library used to come up with a per capita amount for the cash grant. So I just thought this information would be worthwhile for the committee to have while considering what to do with the library funding request.
Yes, thank you very much. Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. Thank you for the information. Couple of things. One is, in using this information, the expenses that you've included in here, it doesn't actually allow us then to compare to the Gibson's Library, because the Gibson's Library at the regional district, the building, the facility is actually a separate function than operating. So if we take this information and include it, we're not comparing funding for the two facilities equally. Okay, that's one thing. The other is that the library is actually a tenant of ours. So I don't know where we would include amortization, et cetera, for a tenant. In our tenant lease, we would indicate what the costs would be. As we know, our lease agreement is expired and hasn't been renewed yet, so we need to do that piece. So then the other piece is I pulled up the funding request that came from the Sechelt Library that was presented, I think, at the last meeting. And the majority of the amount there, well, about half of it, I think, is actually capital items. There are some line items for wages, positions. The total of the capital put forward is $139,700. And that is things like, tablets, security stands, software, etc. So the agreement that we have, the 5-year MOU that we have with the library, allows for them to come forward with requests for capital expenditures in each year. They haven't. In the 5 years that they've had the agreement, this is the last year, they have not asked for additional funds. So I would be in support of us meeting with the other donors, the other funders of the library, and looking at that capital request of $139,700 and seeing who would put in which component of that so we can cover off that amount. We cannot cover off increased positions or increased wages. That's not in our agreement. And that agreement comes up for negotiation this year. So then we could look at having to increase, have an increase for additional staffing. So I'd put forward that we look at the 139.7 under the agreement of the MOU for the additional capital request for 2018 for the library. And I'd look for a second. That's
Is that a motion?
Yeah.
And you're seconding? Thank you. Could you read us the motion, please? Okay.
Okay, see if I can do that again. That the District of Sechelt connect with the other funders, I don't know what you want to say there, but connect with the other funders with regards to the request under the 5-year MOU for the additional capital expenditure for 2018 of $139,700.
That's been seconded. So questions and comments? Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the provision for amortization piece that Director Stewart mentioned can you explain that a little better, that particular piece? Because we have talked in the past about loans and
Right.
Loan ends.
In lieu of the loan, it would basically be the depreciation on the building over a 20-year period. So it's calculated to be $120,000 a year on the depreciation of the building. Actually, I'm not sure if it's a 20-year period, to be honest, but
Anything further?
Well, I'll leave it for now then.
Okay.
If you want to continue, sure.
Okay, and I
Councillor
guess this
Mueller.
is just on the motion then. I saw you doing the calculations there for the number. We're including a number in our motion, and that kind of gives me some trouble because obviously we'd like to have finance verify that, and especially being that some of these items, when you're deciding whether it falls in capital or operations, there's a gray area there. So I don't think I can vote in favor of a motion that has a number in it. I think we have to remove the number. But in the spirit of this discussion, I would definitely like to see our mayor have that discussion with the other funders to see what it is. The tough part about this entire request, nobody here is saying that the library isn't important or that we should refuse the library's requests. The issue is that we're in a very tight budget situation. And I would have to look at that next to the rest of the budget because we're looking at a large tax increase this year. And were we to include this request in its entirety, would make it over 10%, and that's not something I'm willing to entertain. So we would have to find other efficiencies or cut for other services to provide this, in my mind. I couldn't just tack it on to the budget. But I think we need to have that discussion with the rest of the funders, and I would be in favor of that.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Yeah, 2 points. I'd be willing to entertain an amendment to take out the amount and maybe instead of the dollar figure indicate for capital expenditures. If I don't know if that wording works for that. And the other reason I'd like to put this forward now is we are going to be going into public consultation on the budget. So if we put this amount in now and indicate that we are looking at doing this, we're going to get feedback from the community. Either they like it or they don't. If we wait down the road, it'll be past the time when we do the public consultation. I think that's next week,
yes, next Tuesday.
right? So then they'll know the direction we're looking at going and we'll hear from them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Inkster.
I mean, this comes up every few years. We need to meet with the other funders to determine what they're willing to contribute to any changes into our additional amounts. I would think that the solution to some of our issues, considering the fact that the industrial tax base south of Gibson's doesn't seem to be ever part of this, is to look north to Pender Harbor as to whether they'll ever increase their amount. That would help us with our library more. It's something that we should be talking continuously to them about, and because their amount is quite, as we've discussed and as we've heard of the regional district, it's quite a low amount. So that would be probably something that I hope is part of the discussion to talk to that particular area and see if they'll increase their amount substantively. I'm sure the library has done some outreach to those particular areas to see if in fact they're willing to have additional service, if it's affordable to the library in order to increase their amount from their properties. We know that the tax requisitioning from that area is probably, I would say, a little bit bigger than Roberts Creek, and slightly to add a little bit of Elphinstone. I mean, that's the kind of money that area has. I mean, they basically have to fund their own museum in a lot of ways. So, I mean, there's some things that I hope are part of those discussions. And as this figure comes back to us and we have to look at solutions for this, I will tell this committee, and as we go into budget, I'm looking for a budget increase of between 3.5% and 5%. 7% right now is not acceptable to me, and I'll be looking at ways to make changes to our budget to reflect a more politically sustainable budget, politically and financially sustainable budget. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'll just turn to the Director of Finance around a meeting of these funders. I don't see how they could make any kind of a decision outside of the regional district's budgeting, and that won't be happening till through the month of March. Is there time in here to do this motion?
Certainly, Madam Chair, I could try to connect with the Director of Finance of the regional district and see how we could accommodate a discussion with either her and the Director of Finance of the Indian Government District, or the CAOs for that matter, but to try to at least find some direction on how we can communicate and get back to our respective committees and boards.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, we'll vote on the motion. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now, item 6.4, additional 2018 budget requests. We have the report in front of us, pages 76 to 87. And if I could have a motion to receive the report. Moved, seconded? Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Yes, Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in light of the last comment, perhaps we don't need to talk about this. So these are items for information, really, additional requests that are not funded in the current financial plan. They would either require tax increase or a reprioritization of projects that are already listed in the plan. Most of them are capital related, based on the plan that's put forward to the committee and to council, is a 3% tax increase towards capital funding. So if you wanted to stick with that 3% increase in capital, which was endorsed last year, there'd be no additional tax requirements to add these projects, but some other things would have to be shifted off if that was the case. So as far as these projects go, these came as a result of the meetings with the various community associations that we had. The Public Works Committee was given a list of all the meetings that were done, sort of detailing all the capital projects. I then went through that list and asked the Public Works Department to cost out the capital items. So that's attachment 2 on page 86 of the agenda. Really, it's just a list of the various projects that were brought forward by the community associations that are not in the currently in the 5-year financial plan, to seek ultimately council's decision of whether you'd like to include these, reprioritize, increase the budget, what have you. I'm not actually looking for a decision today. Part of this is to bring this forward to you, so when we have the public meeting next week, I can include these in my presentation. So at the public meeting, they'll see the operating expenses, capital expenses, and the unfunded additional requests to hear the input, and then we'll start the deliberations in March. There are 2 operating amounts in here, one for the library grant and one for the downtown Wi-Fi, which is to continue supporting the Wi-Fi because the DBA is unable to do so at this point. Otherwise, it's really just for information only until we move forward with budget deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I'm surprised the DBA hasn't looked more seriously at the at the Wi-Fi with their ability to look after that. And maybe Councillor Mueller knows what's going on with their budget. We've increased it, whether it just doesn't include those particular things. In terms of the Wi-Fi, I have heard off Calgary Street expressions from people that say they can't access it. So that's the unfortunate part, because obviously downtown just means Calgary in that particular case. So it's a system that we need to look at. It's continuing and hopefully looked after by the Downtown Business Association, but also maybe making it more robust. And in terms of these budget items that are in front of us, where I'm concerned is we get these budget items, and this is through you to Mr. Stewart, is when we talked a number of weeks ago about the budget items being presented originally with the tax increases connected to them, there was some funding options presented with them. But these community association, in a sense, it's a political decision, sure, but these community association requests have a number of components, and then some of them could be considered safety and or important infrastructure pieces that may have some budgetary amount linked from some of the reserves we have put aside, gas tax as an example. So it would be neat to see sometimes with some of these whether staff's able to find some solutions for some of these. West Sechelt one that they're coming back with the same 4 requests as they had last year, and I thought 2 of them were of high merit importance. So here we are again, probably having difficulty funding one or both of them, one of which is a safety issue. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just
Councillor
wanted to
Mueller.
thank staff for going through the trouble of doing this. For me, one of the most positive developments in the last 4 years is that we are moving towards a situation where we can start to put little pieces of money into each neighborhood each year, and this provides a mechanism by which we can actually do that. It's tough because the way that our budget has worked so far, we've had to spend large chunks of money in areas, but I think that we need to take the time to make sure we're spending small chunks of money in every neighborhood every single year, just to make sure that people know in those areas that there is some type of constant improvement going on to all of our neighborhoods in a given year. In terms of what we can do with this year, of course, there's a lot of large ticket items, and what I'm most interested in is the ones that have come back a number of years, as was mentioned by Councillor Inkster. And I think moving forward, that's another thing that we'd like to see. Some of these are big ticket items, and that's not in my mind what I had expected to come back from this type of an issue, but in long term, it will allow us for capital planning to make sure that we're dealing with some of these big ticket items. I mean, the people that live in those neighborhoods, they know what is needed on a daily basis. So sometimes we don't get out there more than a few times a year. So it's really vital in terms of what we can do with this year. I'm looking at the small ticket items to see if we can include a couple of these, and also at the ones that have come up many years since being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Director of Finance will not have seen a letter that came through today from the West Sechelt Community Association. They've indicated that the conversations are moving forward with the school district with regards to parking at West Sechelt Elementary School. And they've indicated that on our project list this year, we've included $35,000 for the completion of the Bailey Road sidewalk. They're requesting that instead of that project, that we use those funds towards the school project and work with the school district to alleviate the safety concerns of the school. They said at their AGM, they had 80 people show up at the meeting, and they all agreed that the number one issue in West Sechelt was the safety issues at the school. So I don't believe you got a copy of this. We'll forward it on to you, and I'm sure you can incorporate that. Thank you.
Actually, I did see it.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Inkster.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously the letter was going to Mr. Stewart, and I had thought he'd also would have received it, him or Mr. Curry, because they've been talking to you over the last number of years. So if in fact you haven't, we'll forward it to you. I'm assuming you have. It's been a busy day. The issue that was referenced by Councillor Seegers, and we've all heard about, when an association mainly made up, and we've been to their meetings, we know many of the executive made up of members, many of which that don't have children, identify this safety issue, that should tell us that it's of grave concern to that community and the members on the executive and the association. So I'm hoping that we start looking at that particular work that needs to be done. Historically, though, my concern is, and maybe somebody can shed some light on this, there was some work done over the last 6 years in that area. A lot of money put into roads and sidewalks. Was that not an identified issue then, and why wasn't the money then spent properly in terms of the school sidewalk, et cetera? It's just a question thrown out there. Perhaps those council members that are aware of that decision can explain that, but that probably would have dealt with that issue, this issue, because this issue's been going on now for about 10 years. It's just getting worse.
Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, just a few comments on the issue of safety around our schools, not just West Sechelt. I mean, anybody who's gone to a school around 3 o'clock, pick up their children, will know that there's at least usually a couple hundred other cars there coming, and the road and safety issue that this would deal with, in theory, is not going to go away just because we built a sidewalk. There are still far too many vehicles coming to those schools at the times that are needed, and perhaps the school board needs to take some different steps to try to change behavior, because this was never an issue when I was a child going to West Sechelt. It's something that's come up recently, and right now our communities are just not built to deal with it. Not at any school in the Sunshine Coast can we deal with the vehicle traffic that's coming. So there's a bigger issue here. Hopefully we can deal with it in some way.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I know that when we've looked at this issue in the past, in a lot of cases, the remediation has to happen on private property, school district property. It's not something that the District of Sechelt owns or has access to. But it looks like the school district has actually indicated that they're willing to look at a solution with the District of Sechelt, and as per a letter that supposedly was sent in December or something. So we can track that down and move some conversation forward. Thank you. I
agree with Councillor Mueller. It's not easy to solve. They've done a good job of it at the Gibson's Elementary, because when they built the new school, they took all of those issues into consideration. Here at West Sechelt and many of our other schools, the traffic patterns have changed so drastically since the schools were originally built. Kinnickinnic's not too bad because of its drive in and out kind of situation and the way the buses are dealt with. I would like to see the plan the school district has. It may be that they'll move the staff parking so that that front part of the school can be used for pickup and drop off instead of the roadway, because that's not really what it's meant for. But I think what our Director of Finance wants from us today is to eliminate things that we don't think should be brought forward to the E-Town Hall. Am I correct?
Certainly that's an option. If there's certainly things that you don't want us to invest any more time in at this point, we can certainly take that input and we can drop these from the list. It would certainly make it easier. If there's things you just know aren't going to go forward, there's no point in creating that expectation that perhaps they are being considered.
So who wants to be first at cutting someone's wish list?
Okay,
All right.
So the number of the neighborhood things, I mean, I don't think other than some safety issues, as I've said, and some work that needs to be done, infrastructure, we've done that. So I'm going to leave that out from now. But what I'm going to do is look at some of the downtown SDBA items that have been given to us. And I'm assuming we're looking at all these lists that have been given to us then. So
page 86, 87 would probably be the first.
Okay, I was looking at a previous one. Okay, so let's do that then.
I would be think the first one to remove would be item 5, because that's going to take an awful lot of work with Department of Highways to even look at that one.
Okay. Could we, if we remove that, can we just have that in the form of a motion? Do you want me to make it if you're chairing?
Sure. I have Councillor Seegers first, so.
Right, number 5, I'll look at number 5, but you've brought that one up. I think that is actually incorporated in the Wharf Avenue plans that are coming forward. So I know they're asking us to do this right now, but I think that's incorporated in that plan, is it not?
No, Madam Chair, actually, no, I followed that up with the Public Works Department. No, this is a separate section there. Wharf between, I believe it's sort of trail between Medusa and Wharf.
Between
Exact
trail
area,
and
but yes, no, I confirmed that this is an additional area over and above what's being, or currently in the plans for the Trailway upgrade.
Right, but I think, aren't we this year going out and doing a plan for Wharf? Like the design work on Wharf to put sidewalks, et cetera, in? I think that was something that came forward at one of our other meetings. And this would then be incorporated into that, because we were looking at upgrading the sidewalks and parking on, it would be what, the west side? Right, west side of Wharf. And I think this was something that was put in there at that time.
My understanding was it wasn't. This was over and above what is in the plan now, or what they're planning to do.
Right, the trail, it's not anything to do with trail.
No, even Wharf, there's a, I
Even
believe,
Wharf?
I don't have the cap plan with me, I should have brought it, but there's some Wharf sidewalk work,
Right.
but it's not this particular section. So this is over and above what is in the plan. I asked the Public Works specifically that question, and they confirmed that for me.
Okay. The traffic light at Shorncliffe, number 6, is that part of the required upgrades for the developments that are happening in the area?
It is, it was part of the traffic impact study, said that would be required at some point in the future. We're now negotiating with the developers there, but again, it was listed as something that was deemed desirable right now by this down STBA.
Right, and is the 350,000 the cost for the traffic light, or would that be our portion of the cost?
I believe that would be the total cost for the light itself, the entire cost.
So I think that could be probably taken out at this time, because we don't know what's going to happen there.
Right. So are you making a motion to
Yes.
that effect for
Take-
both
Yes,
5 and 6?
yes. I still believe number 5 is included in the design of Wharf. It was previously. It may not be in this current one, but we'll have to see when that comes forward. It was in the previous one, the pedestrian.
But I don't think we've gotten approval from
No.
Department of Highways.
No, I think what is going to come back this year again is further design work on that. So I think it's premature to put 360,000 in for a pedestrian path across there until we see what that design is.
So a motion to remove 5 and 6 from the E-Town Hall?
Yes?
A seconder? All those in favor? So that's our recommendation there. Anything further under the Sechelt Downtown Business Association? Yes.
I almost wonder with large ticket items like this and any others that we may look at going forward that we will package, including some work that needs to be done on Inlet and how those streets all connect up to Calgary, whether we should be talking about a revite plan that we put together that goes back to the property owners for over a number of years, like we did, I think it was the late 80s, and how that was funded by the downtown with the District of Sechelt with an assist factor just to move some of these forward. I would be really surprised with our budgets over the next number of years if we're going to be able to find the money to invest more than $200,000 a year into the downtown core. We don't have the money in our reserves anymore, nor do we have the ability to tax with all the demands being made in quite a spread out district of Sechelt. So
Thank you, Councillor, but I'm going to push you to move more motions on the existing lists, not add more to the list. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. If we look at 7 and 8, I think we need more details on those. So crossing improvements for Toreto, I don't know what they're talking about there and what the 20,000 would actually do. Cowrie Street Power, 70,000. I know that they had indicated that when buskers or events are happening, even the Rod Run, for example, they're running extension cords from buildings to provide power. But I don't know what this would actually do for us. So I think we need more details on that.
So we want to leave it on the list, but those are some we'll need more work on.
Yes.
Okay, so moving through to Davis Bay. Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, there's a large scale, a couple of them actually in this list, about bike paths, $1 million, Davis Bay to downtown, and then 1.3 Seashell to Sandy Hook. I think that those clearly are multi-year projects, and some of those may be attached to developments. So I think at this point we would want to take them off just for a more fulsome discussion when it does happen.
So 10 and 12?
So nothing disclosed. 10 and 19.
10 and 19, motions to remove those two. A seconder? Are you seconding? Thank you. All in favor? And I think you're right as far as development. There are some things about to happen on Field Road, development-wise, that might deal with bike paths. But at this time, I don't think as a district we have $500,000 for sidewalk up Field Road. But if anyone wants to make a motion. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I'm looking at number 9 and 11, both to do with Selma Park Road. And I believe, and you could probably clarify this for me, I believe we're in conversation with Seashell Band around some potential development that they're looking at doing up there, and then some work on Selma Park Road.
Yes, we share that road, correct? Half of one side is ours and the other side, Seashell Indian Government.
Yeah, I believe there's some development going up there, as well as some things would affect the, perhaps sewer lines and what have you along Highway 101. So yeah, a lot of different road works or things affecting the roads are planning or in the discussion stage.
So if we remove these from the budget, does that mean they disappear, or are they still on staff's radar for when other plans are coming forward that we know that the community wants to do this? If this is something, again, as Councillor Mueller mentioned, this is something that's come up a number of years in a row from the community in Davis Bay, Selma Park area. It is a really sharp turn, and they do need to have some repair done to that. But again, it's not something we want to take as a one-off, given the other stuff that's happening in the area. So if we take it off of the budget at this time, is it still on staff's radar to move it forward?
Yes, it is. It'll stay on this radar for the 2019 plan. We would certainly look at what was not brought forward, not discussed, and look at the priorities really for staff's case when we're preparing the budget in any given year. We'll try to present what we think the highest priority items are, and then seek committee or council's confirmation of that. So again, what's in the plan now is what staff felt was the highest priority items, not these ones, but you may disagree or certainly feel we should either add to the budget or adjust it. So at this point, if you want to take it off, it would certainly be considered by staff as part of the 2019 capital budget discussions.
I would take off 9, 11, and 12 at this point, given the developments that are going forward in the area. So that these will not be in our budget at this point with the full amount, but that we know coming forward, development needs to happen there. The Field Road one as well, we know that there's development coming forward on that side where we'd be looking for sidewalks. So I'd make a motion 9, 10, and 12 would come off.
Seconder? Thank you. All those in favor?
9, 11, 12, or 10.
9, 11, and 12?
9, 11, 12, sorry. 9, 11, 12.
In favor?
So in that list, you guys had 9, 10, 11, 12, and 19.
So far.
Yeah. And I think too that planning is aware of these wants from the community. And as development comes forward, I would hope it would get included in those development plans as they move forward. We can remind them. So West Sechelt Community Association, we dealt with number 13, I believe. And 14 is developer, and so is 15. So I believe those could be left, correct?
Essentially, there is no budget on these ones. They wouldn't be brought forward necessarily. I was just wanted to make a note for you that they weren't forgotten, but it would be on the developer servicing agreements to get these works done.
Thank you. Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I know this is the first time we've dealt with this like this, at least since I've been here. And I think, you know, we're staff as well as council and the community associations themselves are going to have to do a bit of learning in terms of how best to deal with these requests. What I had in my mind was small value requests that would come forward in a yearly basis, and then the large ones would stay on our radar because, as we know, anything of the scale of these $1 million projects requested, they're multi-year projects. So we're going to have to work that in our long-term planning. And then we might really be able to get some of these done. So perhaps moving forward then in future years, we can just add that to the discussion so that the community associations are aware that some of these are not just yearly budget items that require years of planning to execute. So just so we don't give false impressions in terms of what we can achieve. But I think this is great. I think we need to keep this entire list in the back of our minds and just try to work through it and see over the years what keeps coming back and create long-term plans to try to get there.
So the only other item with dollars attached to it is number 21. Build stairs or hand railing for secret beach access. And the association has estimated $40,000. Any more information on that one?
No, unfortunately, that's all it was actually a staff that came up with the estimate of $40,000. But no, I don't know more about what's requested other than what came up with the discussion was simply that, to build stairs to access the beach.
Yes.
So this one, I looked at this one a little earlier, like last night, and I was wondering if there's any appetite to send this particular item to Parks and Public Works Committee. I don't know who did this original estimate, whether it's finance staff in concert with them or whether it was just Parks and Public Works, just to ask them what's going on out there in terms of the issues, whether there's whether stairs and railings are needed or whether there can be work that remedial or otherwise that can be done to create accessibility to that particular secret beach location. If in fact it needs stairs or railings, what kind would suffice for now, et cetera, just in terms of some kind of costing. Sometimes when we go through that committee, they come up with solutions that we are happy they do. Sometimes it's the one that was done this year that was quite expensive, but people are happy with it. But in other cases, they say we can do remedial action that may take $5,000.
So you're suggesting
Yeah,
a motion?
I will make a motion to. I don't know if that works with Mr. Stewart in terms of that. It doesn't go here, back to you or to council, but it goes this way for this.
I don't think there's time because the town hall is before the Parks and Public Works. We can leave it and then discuss it further after the public has had a chance.
Okay, I mean, the public, depending on who comes to the meeting, depending on who comes to the meeting, whether a number of people from Sandy Hook, because it tends to be, that's an area that's used a lot by those that live in the neighborhood, other than those that come to visit and or summer visitors. So those that'll be at the town hall will probably be residents. I don't know how many will speak to it. So it could take that route where it may or may not be touched on, and then maybe we can figure out a way to direct it to Parks and Public Works to see if they can come up with a better financial solution.
So your motion is to move it forward to Parks and Public Works?
Yes, I'd like to, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll leave it on the E-Town Hall then. We're done. Yes.
Two second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Did you
Okay.
get the motion? Thank you. Well, I think we did it in time for you to make your meeting, Councillor Inkster.
Thank you.
A motion to adjourn. Thank you. All in favor? We're adjourned. Any questions? Thank you, you're being kind to me. Yeah.